There's Just Something About Kansas City is brought to you in part by the generosity of our friends at the Cockrell Family Foundation, the Bergman family, and the Sherman Family Foundation. Thank you.
Okay, welcome once again, folks, to There's Just Something About Kansas City. And there's just something about this guy sitting across from me, Tyler Nottberg from U.S. Engineering. Tyler, good seeing you. Your family history is just incredible. Just really, really good seeing you today.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And it's a real honor to be on this show. You're an icon here in Kansas City, so I was really fully appreciative of the invitation to be part of it.
That just means I'm old. Okay, I understand what icon means.
Wise, not old.
I know, yeah,
Wise,
right.
not old.
Yeah, I wish. So how's everybody? How's the family? How's
Everybody's
your
doing
lovely wife, Lee, and then the kids, of course, Maggie and Andrew?
Everybody's doing well. Maggie is in her junior year at the University of Denver, although she's spending most of her year this year in Australia studying abroad. And then our son Andrew's a senior in high school, so it's victory lap year.
Yeah.
And we're just trying to avoid the senior slide. But,
well, that happens. And what's Andrew thinking about for next year?
Well, I think, he told us the other day that he's narrowed his list down from 20 to 19 schools. So,
who got eliminated?
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Which
right.
one got
Exactly.
eliminated? Yeah.
But they're both wonderful kids, and
Good.
as you mentioned, Lee has been just such a rock in terms of being able to she's the CEO of our family, and her the block on her email signature says so, and so that's really clear. And so both the kids are doing well. She's doing well. It's a great fall.
Yeah, and you are all about family. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt if they look at the history of your business, U.S. Engineering, and how far back it goes. I mean, if you go back to the very origin of the business, basically, you could say it was, after Gustav Nottberg moved from Cologne, Germany to here, but it really started 1855. That's before the Civil War.
Yeah.
I mean, you just go, what?
Yeah.
Reading the history of U.S. Engineering was just fascinating to me. And it must make you so proud to be the fifth generation leader of this.
It really is, and the origin story of U.S. Engineering is wonderful. And when Gustav sort of started his metalworking business over in Cologne back in 1855, he had actually been selling knives with Henkel, which is obviously still around today.
It's still here.
And so there's no knives allowed in our house that are not Henkel knives. But he started off doing that, and when he met Margaret, eventually, she started working for him in his metalworking shop, pulling the forge bellows, and I think eventually he thought it would be cheaper for him to just marry her than to keep her on as paid labor.
Smart man.
That's right. That's
Smart
right.
man.
So that was sort of really the origin story of U.S. Engineering, even though, yes, they brought their family here and opened up and hung a shingle right here in Kansas City in 1893.
So, yeah, right. It was 1893. He's moving from Cologne, Germany. Why Kansas City? Most people at that time were moving to New York or somewhere on the East Coast, Boston, Washington, somewhere along the East Coast, but he moves to Kansas City. What was the draw to this town?
Well, from what we've been able to tell, I think they were following friends. And, at that period of time, there were a lot of Europeans, especially Northern Europeans, that were moving to climates that were quite similar to where they had come from. And they had a number of friends, I think, that had moved to the Midwest. In fact, in one of the letters that we have, they are following friends that had decided to move to Topeka. And when they got to Kansas City, meaning Gustav, Margaret, and their three sons and the rest of their family, they thought, well, this is a beautiful place. They settled over in Strawberry Hill, over there in KCK.
That is so
and
cool.
That is where they started their lives. So they didn't quite make it to Topeka, but when they got to Kansas City, like most of us, they fell in love with the place.
Right. And so what was he doing here? And I know he advanced what he was doing, just the knives or whatever else he was doing. But when he opened shop here, he had a different idea in mind, didn't he?
He did. Well, what they originally were just trying to do is to, make a buck. And they had engineering degrees. Gustav did. Some of the sons did. And so they started doing the same thing. They were literally making axles and ball bearings for the railroads, which, of course, were a big industry.
Huge.
One of the sons actually had a job at Heim Brewery, which is now where Rieger is, and so he started working there. And back in the day, when breweries were getting started, when a lot of meat packing facilities were getting started, a lot of the refrigeration systems that were being used to take care of all of that, the sons were talking about whether or not this is something that they could take their metalworking capabilities to, apply it, and then, they decided, okay, well, we can do more than just bend metal. We can actually get involved, use our engineering degrees to begin looking at these refrigeration systems, ammonia refrigeration systems.
Yeah, which were just coming
online.
Because everybody's using ice blocks.
That's exactly
at one
right.
time with the straw around them to try to keep the ice from melting.
That's exactly right. And, interestingly, early in the 20th century, one of the biggest customers, and I've got my great-great-grandfather's old logbook of jobs, one of the biggest, earliest jobs they did was for Wolferman's. When Wolferman's was starting to get up and running here in Kansas City. But we were doing these refrigeration systems all over the place, and those were dangerous. You get ammonia leaks and things along those lines. They needed real competent professionals to be able to take care of that. And so they kind of evolved with technology. Freon became a refrigerant that was being used all over the place. Indoor plumbing was becoming a little bit more common, of course, more high rises, things along those lines. And so they kind of moved with the times. But at the time, it was called Nottberg Brothers Iron and Machine Works. And as most people know, early 20th century, a lot of things with really German-sounding names fell out of favor. So that's when they decided to rebrand. They went with U.S. Engineering, adopted the eagle is the logo, red, white, and blue.
Oh, absolutely. Let's go.
So
we're going to roll.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how they adapted in the early 20th century.
Yeah. That's funny because now that's the second generation as John and Henry Nottberg, right? And they called it U.S. Engineering, Nottberg Brothers, right? At that point. Then they dropped
it.
The Nottberg Brothers.
And they dropped it,
and you really do have an interesting history through World War II, right? Because Granddad was fighting in the war, right?
Right.
He's a Seabee,
which
is the old John Wayne movie. They're on one of the islands out there. They're building runways off the sand so that the Americans can land their bombers to bomb Japan and keep the war effort going. So he was a Seabee. He was right in the middle of it. But your great granddad, right, was still running the business from here, and he was consulting with him over there while he was overseas, right?
That's right. And one of the greatest photos, one of my most treasured photos, is actually a picture of my grandfather, who I got to know, in the early 1980s and everything like that, as he gave me a photo of him on the beach at Okinawa with a number of pipe fitters from U.S. Engineering who were also serving. And the photo itself shows my grandfather in his uniform with all of these other guys, and someone's written down along the bottom of it, U.S. Engineering Okinawa branch.
Oh.
And so I've always treasured that. I keep that right on my desk.
Oh, I would too.
And it's a real reminder.
Yeah.
But one of the most memorable stories that I have from my grandfather growing up was about ice cream. And he used to say every night at dinner, if we were having dinner with them, I scream, you scream, we all scream for ice cream. And he would have ice cream at every single dinner. So that's a big hit if you're a young kid.
Absolutely.
And I remember him telling this story, and I wrote about this actually to the team members at U.S. Engineering a number of years ago. He said that when he was with the Seabees, even though they were responsible for coming in sort of post-invasion and getting the infrastructure set up, I mean, basic things like latrines and all of those kinds of items, he said that the most important thing that they did was to set up the ice cream machines. They would do that sometimes before they got the latrines set up. And he said it was really important because one of the things that was most important about morale was making it feel a little bit like home. Like just you're so far away. And so I think that he really took seriously, and that group really took seriously, this notion of this mission is bigger than us, but it's still all about people.
Yeah.
And he carried that through in how he ran U.S. Engineering, of course, too. But I think there's been this kind of family tradition, and I've always looked back and appreciated that story.
Yeah, right. And you guys in U.S. Engineering contributed to the war effort besides that because you're at Lake City.
Yeah.
Right? In Independence, you took care of all the structural stuff at Lake City as well, right?
Yeah. I've got, again, like from a historical standpoint, I've got this old newspaper, old Kansas City Star, where the headline of that article says, U.S. engineering makes hail for Hitler. And we were building the munitions facility that was going to be, transporting all of those munitions over to Europe. And at the time, it was the largest contract that we had ever received. And, a lot of people joked about the fact we never would have gotten that if our name was not U.S. Engineering. So,
yeah, right. You've been in Nottberg, bro. No.
Yeah.
We can't use those guys.
But another great aspect of that, which again I really appreciate, is that so many men were going off to fight in the war. We had a hiring practice that really brought a lot of women into the construction industry back in the sort of mid 20th century, early 20th century, because we were trying to get as many people as possible who were qualified to build these mechanical systems and do all of this work. And it was not uncommon for anybody who wanted to show up. And if you're able to identify a couple of fittings or something that was on the ground, you go through one door. If you're not interested in the work, you go through another door. And so there was a real sense of coming together and a real equality of purpose back then in the early 20th century around what our demographics look like in the construction industry.
Yeah, now we talk about STEM now as well.
Yes.
As far as education is concerned, to try to get more women interested in, the science and engineering, and they are. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But so you had Rosie the Riveter before Rosie the Riveter.
That's exactly right.
Right, during World War II.
The real deal.
The real deal, yeah, absolutely. In the third generation, Henry Nottberg Jr. opened the service department to complement the construction end. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, actually, OPA's, what we called him, Henry Nottberg Jr., my dad's dad,
right.
He hired a gentleman named Joe Finnegan, who really started the U.S. Engineering Service Department here in Kansas City. And in fact, a couple of weeks ago, we just got to celebrate Joe's 60th anniversary at U.S. Engineering. Wow. His son Brian still works at U.S. Engineering as well. And that aspect of many different families working multiple generations at U.S. Engineering is something that is both unique, and I think a lot of people take a great deal of pride in. And it's not just upper management;
right.
it's pipe fitters and plumbers and sheet metal workers at U.S. Engineering all across the country, not just here in Kansas City, but also in a lot of our other offices out in Colorado and otherwise that have really made a difference for many, many years. So if you ask anyone around Kansas City about U.S. Engineering service, every facilities director, every facilities manager knows who Joe Finnegan is.
Yeah, well, I think that's important too, because the familiarity, obviously, the job done is the most important thing.
Yes.
Okay, so if the job's correct and then you know the people, and you know where they are and who they are, I think that is really, really important.
Yeah.
And you guys are nationwide.
Yeah.
I mean, you're everywhere.
Yeah.
And you had old cousin Gus,
yes.
right, which I'm sure you have a few stories about. He's the one that decided, you know what, I think I'm going to the mountains.
That's right.
Like, I'm getting out of town.
That's right.
I'm headed to Colorado. So to talk about Gus's, I guess he came and said, hey, look, I'd like to open an operation out here. And he went full barrel. Was it 24? He asked for permission to do it, right?
Yeah, right.
And I know you'd be able to tell a story better than I do. But 24 hours later, he comes in town, gets his stuff, grabs a truck or whatever, throws all his tools in, drives back to Colorado Springs, and within 24 hours, he already has a job.
Right.
He already has
I mean, Gus, he was explicitly told, no, like, we don't want to start bidding work out in Colorado, and he was not actually even working for the company at the time, and he called my grandfather and said, hey, congratulations, we won this job out in Colorado. I'm on my way in town to pick up a bunch of tools. I'm going to go out and I'm going to do that. And, we started building barracks down in Fort Carson.
Yeah.
And
you had the Air Force Academy.
Yeah, the Air Force Academy. Yeah. And he really utilized a relationship with a couple of different general contractors out there to really help us build a presence out there. The largest job that we had where we really started was when Kodak was building its big facility in Windsor, Colorado.
Right.
And we ended up staying there and doing a lot of work for years and years and years. And so that was sort of the origin story of Colorado.
That really helped Gus stay there. Okay,
it did.
You know what I mean?
It
Just
did.
help. You got Kodak? Okay.
It did.
All right, keep going.
And he was absolutely brilliant. He and his wife, Jane, and I think he would readily admit that Jane was maybe even smarter than he was, they really pulled together and helped will that entire operation into being. and it's now thriving. We've got amazing leaders and amazing people out there as well too.
Right.
Very complimentary of what goes on in Kansas City.
And then Gus and your dad, Skip,
Yeah.
okay, decided to buy. They decided to buy the company. Right?
The families, both branches, the Gustav and then the Henry branches of the family had equal ownership up until the early 1980s when my dad bought Gus out of his share, and,
right. And they were
so
they're still. I mean, they were young.
They were.
Your
Yes.
dad was what?
Yeah.
I think Gus was only 26.
Yeah.
Your dad was 31.
Well, it
41?
was the opposite.
I'm sorry, it's the
It's
opposite way. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, your
yeah.
dad was young when.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah,
That's
that's
right.
exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Skip was 36. Gus was 51.
Yeah.
And Skip was 36.
Yeah.
So that was
And that
wow.
that was a real tough period of time. I mean, everybody who was around. I mean, you remember back in the early 1980s, the economy wasn't awesome in the United States.
Right.
And we had really decided that we wanted to expand geographically at that time. We were doing refinery work from California all the way to the Carolinas, and we had really become overextended in a lot of the work that we were doing. And I think the statistic that I remember reading was that we had outstanding change orders and unpaid bills in excess of 2 times our net worth at the time. And so
That's not good. That's not a good business plan.
it's not a good business plan. And my dad basically went around the country and tried to settle those claims. It was a very stressful time for a lot of different people. And I think that his hard work during that period of time, and by the way, the trust of a lot of our financial institutions that were working
Right.
with us at the time it was very meaningful. It was
Yeah.
very meaningful.
And
So
he
it was a lot
started-
of hard work.
Yeah, right. He started Institute the computer system as well, right? So
Yeah,
he started to computerize things. He was moving along with the times, right?
There was, he liked to talk about the fact that in one of our old conference rooms, there was just a huge payroll processing machine that he was responsible for making sure that it operated correctly.
Yeah.
Because he had been a political science major. He was not an engineer by trade. So he knew he wasn't going to come in and tell people exactly what the diversity factors on like airflow should have been.
Right.
So that was where he really wanted to kind of spend his time was doing things on kind of building the company comprehensively, putting a great team in place. So.
Yeah, and you lost your dad at a young age. I think you were 20, and your sister was 18.
Yeah.
Right in there somewhere.
Yes.
And here you are. Your dad passes, and you're still a young guy. And you said he was a political science guy. So
Yeah.
you went to Pembroke.
Yeah.
And then you went to Middlebury,
Right.
in Vermont, and now you're into political science. What were you thinking at that time about? Number one, your dad dies, and you're devastated. I can't imagine what that's like. But the idea of my dad has this business.
Yeah.
Do I really want to do this? I'm 20 years old.
Yeah.
I'm going to go into political science. I'm going to end up working politics for a while. What were your thoughts at that time about eventually getting back to this, or wasn't that even on your radar at that time?
He was diagnosed with cancer my freshman year at Middlebury, and so you can look at it as a blessing and a curse. He fought really hard for a couple of years, which was difficult, obviously, for the family, but it also gave him time to plan. It gave him time to plan at U.S. Engineering. It gave him time to have conversations with me and my sister and the rest of the family about what he wanted to see. And one of the great things that I will say on an individual level is that he never put any pressure on me to ever come back and get involved in the business. In addition, he reassured everybody at the company that the survival of U.S. Engineering as an entity was more important than the survival of the Nottberg family's association with it. So he did a couple of things. And you can read about a very specific interview that he did with Family Business magazine at the time, which was, I think, quite influential on how a lot of family businesses started to look at succession planning. But what he did was he began working with key managers at U.S. Engineering to make sure that they literally had ownership, shares in the company, and that there was a plan in place that would allow the company's ownership to transition to those key leaders in the future. At the same time, he put in place a plan for allowing me or my sister, if we ever chose to do so, to come back and get involved in U.S. Engineering. But there were key criteria that
Right,
he
you
put
were
in
going to have
place.
to earn it. You weren't
That's
just
right.
going to walk in and say, hey, I'm back. This political thing didn't work out. So, hey, here I am. I'm your new CEO.
Yeah.
That wasn't going to be the deal.
That was not it. And look, I think my dad trusted the fact that both me and Jamie, my sister, we were going to become really good human beings. That didn't necessarily mean that we were going to be good leaders at U.S. Engineering or we were going to do anything that was super impressive. But there's also the outside chance that maybe things do go wrong. And he knew he wasn't going to be around for that. So he had to make a really tough choice. And he put this opportunity in place that said, if you come back and you choose to get involved, you can do so. You have to meet certain criteria. Ultimately, you have to be approved by the board in order to be able to repurchase a controlling interest in the company.
You have to prove you know what you're doing, too.
You have to prove you know what you're doing, and then you have to put your money where your mouth is. And that was a way for him to both provide the opportunity without a guarantee. It provided him with the ability to make sure that the people at U.S. Engineering who were really responsible for running the organization at the time, Dwight Brinkman, Tim Moormeyer, who is currently the president of our holding company and was the last person my dad ever hired, they had a stake in my success, but they also knew they had control over whether or not this was going to be good for a company that they had put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into, along with my dad. So he did an amazing job of aligning all of those interests and incentives, and I hope he would be proud of how it turned out, but I think the thing he would be most proud of is the team that's been in place, from the time that he passed away until today. So
yeah. And at that time, he didn't know whether his son would end up being the fifth generation.
That's right.
Or if it would even survive. Maybe those guys who were running it before you did would think, maybe I'm sure people try to buy you out. I mean, everybody tries to buy everybody out.
Every time there's a succession plan with family business, it is very disorienting for those within the organization. And then, of course, your customers outside are trying to figure out whether or not this is going to go well. And so you're managing all of these different constituencies and expectations. It's a lot of work. And, speaking of families, one of the people here in Kansas City who I would absolutely love to call out is a gentleman by the name of Bill Daniels. Bill Daniels was in charge of business development for U.S. Engineering. And after my dad passed away, the CEO became Dwight Brinkman, and he was based in Colorado. And my dad was very well known around Kansas City and had a lot of relationships and was sort of a known quantity. And he had hired Bill back in the early 1980s to do business development. And there is literally no one better at genuinely and authentically getting to know people than Bill Daniels. He will remember your former teacher's dog's friend's cousin, and it's not because he's trying to put on a performance, it's because he genuinely cares. And so the relationships he developed with our customers, the relationships he developed with owners and also team members at U.S. Engineering, he is one of the reasons why we really were able to maintain our identity here in Kansas City for years during that period of time. And it was, I think, very reassuring to the market, and it was very reassuring to people at U.S. Engineering as well, too. Everybody knows Bill Daniels.
Yeah, and God bless him, for what he did, because it has helped the family continue on. We've all watched Succession, so we know how bad it can get. Okay, so you just go, what? Yeah. We all know how families can get sideways, we'll say, in a situation like that, which yours didn't do. Okay, before we get into your part of U.S. Engineering in the fifth generation here, let's go back. You're out of college. You went to Oxford afterward. Congratulations, by the way. That is not an easy task. Great education, great school. There's no fooling around over there either. And then you decide to do politics. And I think you said that really helped you understand more about business almost than anything else did, was that period of time that you spent in politics, right?
Well, yes. I had been fortunate enough to do an internship between the summer of my sophomore and junior year at Middlebury with Senator Richard Lugar. He was a senator from Indiana.
Right. He ran for president.
And he ran for president, and I had worked on his presidential campaign in Vermont, where I believe the claim to fame was that was the highest percentage total he had received in any primary of any state that he sort of competed in before he dropped out. And so I had gotten to meet him literally during a campaign event that I helped to set up in Middlebury, where he literally stood up on a soapbox and delivered his address to the people who had gathered in the community center there. And so I'd gotten to meet him, and I had been full of admiration for a lot of the work that he had done on Foreign Relations Committee, and I was very interested in international politics, and so I had applied for an internship, and I had gotten that. And he turned into, and I think everybody who has had this in their lives, I know you had as well, you have a mentor who's very influential in your life. And he was so generous with his time, with me, with a lot of the interns, but we ended up staying in touch. And he was a real guide for me for many years. And I can't thank the Lugar family enough because they're a fantastic family. But Senator Lugar was a real special person in my life. And he really helped design some of my pathways, or at least ask me questions about what I wanted to do in the future. And so that was very important for me, so that when I was trying to decide after Oxford what I wanted to do, I wanted to come back to Washington, D.C. And I ended up getting a job with a woman by the name of Susan Eisenhower.
Oh, great. Yeah,
she had started the Eisenhower
There's a name
Institute.
For you.
That's exactly
Yeah,
right.
right.
And so I worked for her as she was sort of starting the Eisenhower Institute, and was really able to cut my teeth in some of those areas. I got to work with some amazing people in addition to Susan, a gentleman by the name of Andrew Goodpaster, who was a very influential person in the Eisenhower administration and had since retired but was still working there. And so I got my exposure and really felt good about being able to do a lot of that work, and was really excited about being on that pathway.
Mm-hmm.
I really was.
Yeah, so then when Senator Lugar starts asking you those questions, okay, what do you want to do? What were your answers in the beginning, and then after so many years, what were the answers then?
I really wanted
How did it morph?
I really wanted to stay in politics, and
Do you want to be do you want to be president of the United States?
No, gosh, no.
Do you want to be a
nothing.
senator,
No,
congressman?
I really liked a lot of the policy work that was being done. I liked diplomatic work. I had been able to travel with Susan back and forth to all kinds of countries, doing all sorts of work, and was actually quite relevant to work that Senator Lugar had done. We actually awarded him the Eisenhower Distinguished Service Award for his work with Senator Nunn, Sam Nunn, who is from Georgia, who's a Democrat. Back when Democrats and Republicans worked together,
They believe it or not, folks, they used to get along.
It used to happen. Well, the staffers at Senator Lugar's office and the staffers at Senator Nunn's office would go to Cactus Canteen and have tacos on Friday nights, right?
They'd battle all day and then go out and have a couple of drinks later.
So they started really important, they sponsored a bit of very important legislation back in the 1990s called the Nunn-Lugar legislation. So a lot of the denuclearization work that was being done, that is some of the work that I got to do actually with Susan, because she was serving on a pretty important commission with the Department of Energy. So I loved that. I loved all of those policy details. I loved the complexities of diplomacy. I loved working internationally. I had a background in languages, and so that was very exciting to me. It really was. But one of the things that Senator Lugar talked about was when he was working back on his family farm in Indiana, he always maintained a real focus on what the importance was of business, family obligations.
And staying in touch with the common man as well.
Yeah, and maybe that sounds a little bit more sort of condescending than it should, the common man. But I think it was really like just people working hard and taking seriously what family obligations were. And he had an opportunity to kind of work on his family farm. And I think he found that very rewarding. I think in retrospect, he was telling me these things to make sure that I always considered what that opportunity at U.S. Engineering was. And he knew all about it. And then I still remember him calling me the day after my father passed away. And I don't know who told him or how he found out, but I was woken up the next morning by a phone call from him, and we had about a 15-minute conversation. And I just remember thinking, here's someone who's a senator, here's someone who's dealing with all kinds of very, very important issues. And he took time out of his day to call me and offer me his condolences and kind of really talk about what it was that meant so much to him and in these contexts when he had lost loved ones. And so I ended up staying in touch with him and really reaching out and getting good advice from him about what to consider on a go-forward basis. And I think he just knew that one day I should consider coming back and getting involved in U.S. engineering. And then circumstances ended up presenting themselves in that way back in 2004. So
yeah. So what was it? Was there an aha moment, or it just sort of went that way?
Well, I think there were a few things that there was sort of a confluence of events. Number one, our daughter had been born in Washington, D.C. My wife was working as an occupational therapist. I was working actually for a company. I had moved on to working for a company that was based out of New York called Gerson Lehrman Group. And I was doing a lot of traveling. Our daughter was born. We were far away from our families. Both of our families were back in Kansas City. In addition, U.S. Engineering was going to be going through a transition. The CEO, Dwight Brinkman, said he wanted to retire within the next few years. And so there was a lot that was in motion at the time. And through conversations with members of the board at U.S. Engineering, as well as our own personal circumstances, Lee and I decided this is an opportunity that we should look at. I never stopped cheering for the Royals, never stopped cheering for the Chiefs. I was a complete bore to all my friends in Washington, D.C., who wanted to, kind of cheer for, at the time, the Redskins.
Yeah, sure.
And so being able to always be drawn back to Kansas City, visiting our families back in Kansas City, that was a big pull. And being away, I think, helped us really appreciate all of the incredible things that Kansas City offered. And there was just a sense that we were on the cusp of something, maybe, in Kansas City. And so we looked at that opportunity, and we told our friends that we were moving back to Kansas City and that we were going to get involved in a construction company. And there were a lot of blank looks from friends saying, I don't really understand what that choice looks like. Didn't you study political philosophy? And I said, well, yes, but it wasn't so much an aha moment as much as it was a series of conversations about what we wanted to do. And so, that was 20 years ago now. Wow. When we came back. Yeah. And one of the things that I really appreciated about what happened was how the company expected me to enter the organization.
Yeah, I'll bet that was it. So I was just going to ask you, how'd you earn your way back into a company that originally had your last name on it?
Well, when I came back and got involved, I think everybody understood that there was a particular direction that this was all going to go. So it was a little bit like being an animal in the zoo. Anything that I would do, people were sort of like watching, what is it, what is this kid going to be involved in? And I was very fortunate because Dwight and then our CFO at the time, Bill Richards, as well as the two board members that my dad had worked with at the time, Choppy Ryan Frank and Pat Coran, had said, you really need to spend time learning about the operations of the business. In addition, Tim Warmeyer, who had been appointed executive vice president, and he was going to take over as president, he and I developed a great working relationship. And that was a period of time where, again, as we talked about earlier, there was just a lot of uncertainty. So what was it that I needed to learn? I needed to learn what it was that we did. I literally spent the first 3 or 4 months of my time working out in the Colorado operation with Dwight, working with some of our amazing superintendents, going and visiting job sites, literally learning what an air handling unit is. I spent a week welding in our shop out there.
I was going to ask you, are you an engineer of any kind?
No.
You're the head of U.S. Engineering, but you're not
I was sort of like being shuttled all around. You should see this. You should do this. And again, I spent about a week in the welding shop, and the guy that was in charge of it, his name's Al Wiggett. He would just watch me all day long just burn rod, and by burning rod, literally burn it right up and off onto my foot. And at the end of the week, I was finally able to get a really nice bead on a piece of flat carbon steel. And I think as soon as I got one, Al and the team said, "Okay, well that's it. You can stop.
Please leave. You're burning up our rods."
Right, exactly. So they actually cut it out, and we all signed the back of it. And I still keep it on my desk as sort of my proudest moment of quote unquote learning how to weld. And so I did that, then moved back to Kansas City and began working as a project engineer on some of the projects that we were working on. Really big project we were doing for Harrah's Casino at the time. And
you've done some incredible projects here in Kansas City.
Yes.
Let alone everywhere else in the country.
That's right. So I started doing that, and then started working. I was eventually told, you need to start managing your own projects. And this is a great story. I'm sitting there in my office one day, putting together O&M operations and maintenance manuals for another job that I was a project engineer on. These huge binders that you provide to owners, saying this is all the equipment that we installed, here's how it works, here's where it's located, et cetera. And the vice president of the construction group there in Kansas City at the time walked into my office. His name's Dan Oxler, another great family that's been associated with U.S. Engineering for a long time. He said, Tyler, I think it's about time you learn how to manage your own projects. I said, okay, great. He said, meet me here tomorrow morning around 6 o'clock. We'll drive up to William Jewell, and it's a little bathroom remodel. I said, great. So he comes and picks me up the next morning at the office. We drive up to William Jewell, and we walk into the cafeteria up there, and there's like 30 people there. There's plans all over the tables, and he's going around introducing me as U.S. Engineering's project manager for the work up at William Jewell. And I'm looking around, and I look at Dan, and I say, this isn't a bathroom remodel. And he looks back at me and sort of walks away, and he says, oh, there's a bathroom involved. And that moment and that period of time where I spent a couple years up there kind of doing work on new student union, huge new steam loop around the area, I got to work with some field people who really indoctrinated me in the importance of why people in the field, people who work with their hands, everyone who's been a part of U.S. Engineering, who've been welding for centuries, what the real value of those individuals were. And I still have great friendships from that. A gentleman by the name of Ryan Etter, who's one of our kind of top plumbing superintendents. His daughter and my daughter were about the same age when they were born. We became friends, and I have stayed in touch with him, and he's a real leader for us right now. But early on, it really taught me the value of superintendents and foremen and getting organized around.
Well, you saw it at the ground level. You came in welding and sent to Colorado to weld, and then you just took step by step to get
I'm definitely not a welder, but I think that being able to look around and see that the things that we do as an organization, that we literally get to build the infrastructure that we all live in, I think our craftspeople are very, very proud of that. And I know it's something that I'm very proud of. And it really struck me a few years into my time at U.S. Engineering that whether you want to call it something that's in your blood or whether you want to call it something that is just, sort of part of the family legacy or the institutional legacy of the city itself, this is a hard-working city.
Oh, yeah.
And the people that work at U.S. Engineering, in my mind, are emblematic of what that work ethic really is.
Yeah, right. And it must make you proud. I mean, obviously.
Very much so.
Yeah, I mean,
all of our team members, you get to walk around the city and you get to go with your family. You walk through the new airport. I know every single plumber, pipe fitter, sheet metal worker, project manager, project engineer, receptionist is able to say, hey, we were part of that project. And you get to literally walk your friends and family through it. You can be very proud of that.
Yeah,
Performing Arts Center.
I was going to say the Kaufman Center, Performing Arts.
Children's Mercy Park.
The high schools all over the area that you worked in. So you worked in, the educational system as well. As far as education is concerned, it's interesting. It seems to be morphing a little bit, I think. We talk about STEM, and I think the schools that will get the HVAC guys and the plumbers and the electricians and other people of that nature to focus them in on. You don't have to go to a 4-year school and study liberal arts, or even go to a 4-year school and study engineering for all practical purposes. You could do it at a different level. You won't have the giant bill to pay when you get out.
Right.
The whole thing, and I just think it just seems to be going that way. Is that good?
I think what's good is giving people options, making sure that kids who are coming up through the education system don't feel like they're on some sort of path-dependent rail. And everybody needs something different. And everybody that is looking for their next opportunity or how they want to make their way in the world, they should be very aware of what all of those options are. and there shouldn't be someone telling them that if you don't do this, then you are not going to be successful in life. And so I love the idea that we're offering more kids more of these opportunities. I love the idea that we are really kind of promoting what those opportunities look like across the board. And we've got an education system that is going to continue to evolve. But if you have a situation where, for example, in our case, you're able to encourage people to think about going into the trades, or if you're able to get people into the trades and promote what their education looks like within those programs. So, for example, out in Colorado, we helped start Western States College of Construction, where individuals who are going into the trades, going into the unions, they're actually able to earn credits towards their degree. So there's a really big difference between going and paying a whole bunch of money to go to college if you're not really sure, and then instead going to do an apprenticeship where you're actually paid to learn how to do a job with your hands. But at the same time, I think that there's a wealth of opportunities for people to hopefully pursue higher education if that's something that they want to do, and if they have access to the funds to be able to do it. To me, education is about, like, what does that joint choice look like between what you want to do and what those opportunities are that are offered.
And the evolution now of your business and how much it's changed 20 years from now. Talk about AI and which way that's going. How will you handle that? And I think that's interesting because now, after I've talked to you all this time, it's pretty easy to figure out that you're a people person.
Yeah.
And it's people. AI ain't people. Okay, that is not.
Yeah.
You're not going to have a best friend who is a robot.
Yeah.
Hopefully, you're not going to have a best friend who is a robot. But your thoughts on AI and where that's going is specific to your industry, or whichever way you think it's going, period.
Well, there's sort of two components to it. One, on the actual construction side of things, we have a lot of specialization in data centers. And so a lot of work that we do building data centers around the country gives us a really good peek into the direction that the infrastructure on this trend is going. Maybe it's not even a trend. It's sort of like a permanent fixture of what the future economy looks like. On the actual company infrastructure side of things, we tend to look at a lot of the work that we're doing to really kind of promote off-site manufacturing and the work that we're doing and the investments that we're making in off-site manufacturing as part of the future of the construction industry to be really important because it gives our team members an opportunity to augment their skills and their expertise. So rather than thinking about the direction that this is going from a replacing people standpoint, our focus is on reinvesting in all of the human beings that are part of U.S. engineering now more than ever, doubling down on it. My little shtick that I give to people when I do new hire coffees or when I'm kind of meeting with them is I say, I don't really like employees. And people sort of look at me and I say, we're team members. The term employee connotes a very transactional relationship. Right. You come into work, we pay you, you go home, you come back the next day, et cetera. I think in this day and age, if you are not being curious and collaborative, if you are not investing in people, if they do not believe that the partnership from the company towards you is genuine, if that organization is not invested in your well-being, then why would they want to be part of that organization? Right. Because surrounding them every day is more and more dehumanization. And that is always going to be the greatest threat to growth, in my opinion. I think humans are infinitely creative, and the more that we invest in people, and if we give them tools like AI tools like a ChatGPT, we expect them to use it to create a more deeply human experience at U.S. Engineering with our customers, with each other, in our communities. So I see those as tools, not answers.
Yeah, I was going to say, just don't rely on that.
Yeah.
We have to go beyond that and just be able to, mix this in with what exactly we're trying to do.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And so, when we think mostly about strategically where we're trying to position ourselves, it really is trying to double down and figure out, okay, how do we make sure that the environment within which everybody at U.S. Engineering is functioning is deeply human? Right. Like, what does that mean for us as an organization? What does that mean on the part of individuals and their expectations. And it's got to be a partnership. It has to be a partnership.
Right.
Anyone who says that, a team member just owes everything to the company, or the team member thinks, well, the company just owes me everything, that's just like a mismatch of expectations.
Yeah. And I think people will understand it's 131 years now, correct?
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
which is just think about a family-owned business for 131 years. That just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, everything you're saying is exactly right. It's about people.
Yeah.
I don't think
And a little bit of luck.
Yeah, well,
And a little
there's
bit of
always
luck, yes.
because you've weathered, depressions and economy downturns and everything, wars,
Yes.
civil war,
Yeah.
wars,
Yeah.
just everything that could possibly happen, and has not
Yeah.
broken that fabric, which has to make you tremendously proud.
Well, a lot of people joke about the fact that they see my title block come through in an email and it says, Chairman and Chief Optimist. And people ask me what that's all about. And I try and explain to them that it's not just willy-nilly optimism. I just don't always think everything's going to turn out great. My optimism is rooted in the fact that I am surrounded by people at U.S. Engineering and in my own personal life that are committed to willing to work hard. They're willing to overcome challenges. They're not going to shy away from that. And in fact, in a lot of ways, you expect disappointment. You expect that things are going to go wrong. The old Mike Tyson adage about everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face,
Yeah.
right? And so my optimism is rooted in our ability to kind of overcome those things. The idea that the sun's going to rise the next day. And so I think that, that optimism, I think it's grounded in the reality of what it means to simply continue to put one foot in front of the other and just try your absolute best, try your best to give people the benefit of the doubt, but, being able to overcome those obstacles, working together.
Yeah. And so let's talk about Kansas City.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're here. You could live anywhere, anytime. You could, but you still remain here, and this is your home. And, you and Lee are tremendously involved in the community. Your philanthropy has been incredible. You have your own family foundation. And what is it about this city for you?
So for me, Frank, I mean, this city is about why you never left, right, too. You end up meeting people, you get involved in organizations, and you feel like a lot of the people in this city and a lot of the institutions in this city are looking out for each other's interests. And I don't necessarily think that it is because people on the coasts like to make fun of us. We've got sort of common enemies, so to speak, I don't think that is really it. I think, when I look at two components of this, I come back to what Tom Honig used to say about how Kansas City's economy is dynamic because we don't have a strength. We have many multiple strengths. And I think about that in the same way that I think about all these personal relationships and the investments that people have that go beyond Midwest nice, right, which is a way for others to try and sort of characterize things. I think that our community is so deeply committed to continuing to grow together that it has an attraction that is magnetic because it creates this symbiotic relationship between business, between communities. Right. And that does not mean that we don't have problems that seem intractable at times. It really does. But I have never witnessed a situation where people in this community stop talking with one another, stop trying to work together, stop trying to make things better. We have really big issues that we can that I think that we should be able to overcome. And so for me, it's just that consistent pathway that we are on, commitment to working with one another that is emblematic of what our identity is. And right. You know what? I want to be a part of that identity. That is how our family functions. That is how we see a lot of other families who we look up to function. And so that gives me hope. That gives me my optimism.
Yeah, that's right. Well, the Nottberg family is one of the reasons why there's just something about Kansas City. And Tyler, I know you would never take credit for that, but you are certainly, you and your wife Lee and everything you've done and your kids. And hopefully it stays in the Nottberg family for Another 131 years, we don't know. We won't be here, but we hope. And
that's a fact. That is a fact,
and then
yeah.
you've laid the groundwork to just keep everything rolling and keep U.S. engineering where it is, which is one of the great companies in America, and obviously one of the great companies that's housed right here in KC.
Well,
we love it.
I appreciate that. This
Yeah.
community has demonstrated a great deal of trust in U.S. engineering and my family, and we like to return the favor every single chance we get.
Nottberg family, another reason, just something about Kansas City.
There's Just Something About Kansas City is a registered 501c3 nonprofit organization with the mission of documenting the stories that have built our city to inspire and educate generations to come. Our work is made possible by the generous support of local partners such as the Cockrell Family Foundation, the Bergman family, and the Sherman Family Foundation. For more information about how you can help us share these stories, visit our website at somethingaboutKC.org. Thank you.